Here's something that sounds wrong the first time you hear it. Time isn't speeding up. It never was. The clock on your wall is ticking at the exact same rate it ticked when you were 7 and a single afternoon could hold an entire universe. Nothing about a second has changed. What changed is you, or more precisely, what changed is how often your brain bothers to take a picture. Because that feeling, the one where you look up and somehow it's June again, where a whole year just sort of happened without asking your permission, that feeling is real. Painfully real. But it isn't time doing it to you. It's something quieter. And honestly, a little stranger. You stopped taking pictures, and nobody told you when it started. So before you blame the calendar, stay with me, because the calendar is innocent. By the end of this, the most ordinary feeling you have that a year vanished is going to stop being about time at all. It's going to be about memory and a tiny camera in your skull that's slowly winding down. And weirdly, once you see the real reason, you get a little of that time back. Not as a metaphor, as an actual lever you can pull. Let's go. So let's start with the answer you already have because you've heard it. And it isn't wrong. It's just not the whole thing. The version most people carry around goes like this. When you're 5, 1 year is a fifth of your entire life. 20%. An enormous slab of everything you've ever experienced. By the time you're 50, that same year is 1/50th. 2%. A thin little sliver. So the years feel like they're shrinking because proportionally they are. This idea has been around a long time. It got formalized back in the late 1800s, and mathematicians later dressed it up on a logarithmic scale, which is a fancy way of saying the math curves. And the curve has a punchline that should genuinely stop you. If you run your felt time on that scale, the halfway point of an 80-year life doesn't land at 40. It lands somewhere around your early 20s. Let that land. By the time you're old enough to rent a car without a surcharge, you may have already lived half of your life as your brain experiences it. Half. Which is either fascinating or faintly horrifying depending on how your week is going. There's an old observation that fits right in here going back well over a century. The idea was that as we get older, fewer and fewer genuinely new things happen to us, so each year has less in it that stands out, and the whole stretch blurs together. Youth colors everything in for the first time. Then the coloring book fills up, and we stop reaching for new crayons. It's a lovely way to put it. It's also, as we'll see, only the front half of the story. But here's the catch with that whole proportional story. It describes the feeling beautifully. It does not explain it. Saying a year feels short because it's 2% of your life is a bit like saying you're sad because your face is doing a frown. True. Technically. Also completely missing the machinery underneath. Your brain doesn't actually sit there each December running division going, well, that was only 2%. File it under brief. That's not, well, how any of this works. So if the clock didn't change and the math is just describing the symptom, then something real has to be changing inside your head. And it is 2 things, actually, maybe 3. And the first one you can test on yourself tonight. Here's the first thing. Your brain doesn't measure a stretch of time by counting seconds. It can't. It has no internal odometer logging raw duration the way your phone does. Instead, when you look back and ask how long was that, your brain does something a little sneaky. It counts memories, basically. It checks how many new moments worth keeping it filed during that stretch, and it uses that pile as its ruler. A thick pile of new stuff reads as a long time. A thin pile reads as short. Now think about a kid's summer. Everything is a first. The ocean turns out to be bigger than the idea of the ocean. A wasp up close, with opinions. The night you stay up late enough to find out what the adults are actually like when they think you're asleep. The brain is photographing non-stop because new things demand to be recorded, and that summer ends up enormous in the file. Now think about last March. Be honest. You drove to work. You drove to work. You drove to work about 20 more times. Your brain, which is efficient and a little lazy, looked at commute number 9 and went, we have this one, and quietly stopped taking pictures. So when you reach back for last March, honestly, there's almost nothing in the drawer, and a near-empty drawer reads as gone. This is the part researchers call the holiday paradox, and it's genuinely backwards. A boring week feels slow while you're trapped inside it, then collapses to nothing the second you look back on it. A week stuffed with new things flies past in the moment, then unfolds in memory into something that feels huge. Time perception studies that compare estimating a stretch while you're in it versus from the outside find exactly this gap, and the gap tends to widen as people get older. So the thing that felt long is the thing you'll remember as short, and the thing that vanished while you lived it is the thing that'll feel, looking back, like it lasted. Honestly, that's the part that gets me. We spend enormous effort engineering the smooth, frictionless week where nothing unexpected happens. So the smooth weeks are exactly the ones our memory throws straight in the bin. Want to test it tonight? Try this. Sit down and account for last Tuesday, not this week's Tuesday. For most people, there's a beat of total blankness, then a reconstruction by logic rather than memory. Well, I work Tuesdays, so I must have done the thing I always do. That blankness isn't a memory problem. Your memory is working fine. There just wasn't anything filed, because nothing that day was new enough to keep. Now try to account for the most interesting day you had in the last year. It comes back in detail, in scenes, kind of in order. Same brain, same week-long gap since it happened. The only difference is how much new was in it. You're not looking at the limits of your memory. You're looking at its filing policy. And you felt the flip side of this too, probably on your last real trip away. The first couple of days somewhere new feel almost long, in a good way. Every street is unfamiliar. Every meal is a small event. Your brain is back on its childhood setting, photographing everything. Then, somewhere around day 4, it speeds up, and suddenly you're packing and wondering where the week went. So while you're there, it feels like it raced by, but months later, that one week takes up more room in your memory than the entire ordinary month that followed it. Same 7 days, way more pictures, basically. That's not the trip being magic. That's just novelty doing the one thing it always does, quietly stuffing the file. And here's where the ruler gets genuinely strange. Ask almost anyone over 40 to walk through their life, and the memories don't spread out evenly. They pile up, every time. There's one window that comes back thicker than all the rest, roughly from age 10 to 30, and it's so reliable that memory researchers gave it a name. They call it the reminiscence bump, and it's one of the most repeated findings in the whole field. 2 decades, give or take, that hold a wildly disproportionate share of everything you'll ever vividly recall. The first loves. Moving out. The music that, let's be honest, you still think is objectively better than whatever's out now. And here's the unsettling bit. For a lot of people, that bump is mostly behind them by the time they hit their mid-30s. Not because nothing happened after, but because after a certain point the firsts get rarer, and the brain stops bothering to lay down fresh, detailed copies. So when people say it feels like their life sped up after their 20s, they're not being dramatic. By the measure their own memory uses, it kind of did. Most of the highlight reel you'll screen at the end was shot before you turned 35. Sit with that one for a second. Okay, second mechanism, and this one is stranger because it hints the slowdown isn't only about memory. It might, turns out, be physical. There's a hypothesis that came out in 2019 from an engineering researcher at Duke University, published in a journal called European Review, and the core idea is almost uncomfortable in how mechanical it is. The claim is that your whole sense of time is built out of mental images, little snapshots your brain stitches together from what your senses hand it, and the rate at which you process those snapshots is not fixed. When you're young, the images come fast, rapid fire, a high frame rate. As you age, a few unglamorous physical facts pile up. Your eyes make these tiny jerk movements called saccades, a few times every second, and in the gaps between them your brain grabs an image. Those movements slow down with age. The neural pathways the signals travel get longer and more tangled as the brain grows, and later in life they start to degrade. Stack all that up, and you end up processing fewer images in the same chunk of clock time. And here's the part that does something to me. Think about what happens when you pull frames out of a film. The action speeds up, right? The same minute of footage, with half the frames removed, plays faster. So the theory says you're not imagining the acceleration, you're watching your own life at a lower frame rate, and a lower frame rate looks like fast forward. Now, I have to be straight with you here, the way this channel tries to be. This is a hypothesis, not settled law. Plenty of memory researchers think it's too tidy, that it leans too hard on the eye stuff and not enough on what the brain does with attention. The evidence is real, but it's thinner than the proportional story and thinner than the memory story. We don't fully know yet, but as a way of feeling the problem, it's hard to shake. Your childhood didn't just have more firsts in it. It may have literally run at more frames per second. And then there's a third piece, quieter, more chemical. Somewhere in your head, there's a rough internal stopwatch, and one of the things that sets its pace is dopamine, the same chemical that fires when something new and interesting shows up. This is also why childhood felt so electric, by the way. A brain swimming in novelty is a brain getting hit with dopamine all day long, and that flood is part of what stamps those early memories in so hard and so bright. New stimulus, little dopamine pulse, the clock gets a fresh calibration. Here's the inconvenient bit. Dopamine levels start drifting down from somewhere around your 20s and keep drifting for the rest of your life. And when that pacing chemical thins out, the internal stopwatch seems to run faster relative to the real one outside, which is the opposite of what you'd guess. You'd assume less of the get-up-and-go chemical means everything drags. Instead, the internal clock speeds up, and a fast internal clock makes the outside world feel like it's crawling, which means real time feels like it's slipping past you quicker. This one is also still being argued over, fair warning. But notice the shape forming across all three. Every mechanism basically points the same way, and not a single one of them is the calendar. But wait, if this is all just decline, frame rates dropping, dopamine draining, memory turning stingy, then we've got a problem. Because not every adult year feels short. You know this. There are years deep in adult life that feel enormous looking back. The year you moved somewhere you didn't know a single street. The year everything fell apart and then slowly against the odds didn't. The first year with a newborn, which people describe as the longest and shortest year of their life at the same time, which should be impossible and somehow isn't. Those years are dense, genuinely dense, thick in the file, genuinely. And they happen to brains that were already aging, already running slower saccades, already low on the good chemical. So age can't be the whole story, because if age were destiny, those big years couldn't exist. And they obviously do. So look, what's the actual variable? It was never how old the brain is. It's how much new you fed it. And this is where it stops being a tidy science fact and starts being personal. Because put the three mechanisms side by side and the real picture isn't time speeding up. It's two things happening quietly at once. Your camera's frame rate is dropping slowly, and you can't do a lot about that part. But you also stop pointing the camera at anything new, And that part was never time's fault. That part is a stack of small, reasonable, completely understandable choices. The same route to work every morning, lunch from the same two places, 6 apps opened in the same order before you're even fully awake. Weekends that rhyme a little too closely with last weekend because routine is comfortable and decisions are tiring, and honestly, who has the energy? And none of it is a moral failure. It's just that every time you pick the familiar version, you kind of hand your brain a frame it already owns. And a frame it already owns doesn't get saved. So the year doesn't vanish because time stole it. The year vanishes because gently, without you ever deciding to, you let most of it repeat. And your brain, doing exactly its job, declined to keep the reruns. But here's the better news hiding in all of this, and it's the reason this isn't a sad video. If the year vanished because it repeated, then the lever is novelty, and novelty is shockingly cheap. You don't have to move countries or blow up your life. The brain's bar for new is honestly lower than you think. A route home you've never taken, honestly just to see where it goes. Ordering the thing on the menu you can't pronounce. Actually talking to the person you usually just nod at on the way in. Picking up some skill that makes you bad at something again, which, weirdly enough, adults almost never let themselves feel. Each one is a fresh frame. A new picture in the drawer your memory is forced to keep, because it can't quietly file it under same as before. Do enough of them and something genuinely strange happens. And looking back, the month actually thickened. It feels longer, not because you added a single hour to it, but because you gave your memory more to actually hold on to. The people who study this even have a phrase for the fix, and it isn't more time. It's more firsts. You can't slow the camera down, but you can absolutely give it something worth photographing. So tonight, when you catch yourself doing the thing, looking up at the calendar and feeling that small lurch of where did it all go, try swapping the question. Don't ask why is time speeding up, because it isn't, and the calendar is going to keep being innocent no matter how hard you stare at it. Ask the real one instead. How many pictures did I actually let my brain take this month? Because that number, not your age, is the thing quietly setting the speed. The vanished year was never stolen from you. It was mostly reruns, and your brain, doing its job with a kind of brutal honesty, kept only the parts that were new. So that's not cruelty, that's care. It's the same system that keeps your real memories from drowning in a sea of identical Tuesdays. You can't put more hours in the day, and you can't crank the frame rate back to where it sat when you were 7, but you can hand that little camera something it has never seen before. And the strange, quiet gift buried in all of this is that the cure for a life moving too fast was never more time. It was honestly more attention. So this week, go take one picture worth keeping. If this is the kind of thing you like to sit with, you know where the subscribe button lives. No pressure. Same world. Different lens.